What's up, YouTube family? Brother Gerald here from the Pastor's Cave. I'm actually sitting in my dining room at the house, but that's where I'm doing the video from. So I want to do another video about crazy things that happen in ministry. Now, the first couple of videos I did been kind of lighthearted, just kind of almost funny stories that happen, like with the air conditioning and with the mud roads. But today is a little bit more of a serious video. This is something that you will absolutely run into sooner or later, more likely sooner, in ministry. I think since the time this incident happened, things have only gotten worse. Now, I want to preface this by saying, when I started out as a pastor, and if you happen to watch this and you're a new pastor, young pastor, maybe you haven't been doing it a long time, I want to caution you on something. From my own life, when I began in ministry, I like to say it this way. I heard somebody say this years ago, and it stuck with me. I had all the answers, and I didn't even know what the questions were, right? So, as somebody has rightly said, a new, particularly young pastor goes to a church to change the world, and he finds out that he can't even change the bulletin, right? It's like that in some places that you'll serve at. And so one of the first things that I ran into where I got a little bit of tension at in ministry was we have, in most Baptist churches, all are not the same, but we have a nominating committee. And so what a nominating committee does is they are responsible for recruiting all of your teachers and leaders. Let's say they go and they recruit teachers for Sunday school each year. And now a lot of times those teachers will just be the same people. They'll just say, hey, you want to keep serving? Yeah, I do. And so the nominating committee makes a recommendation to the church, and the church votes on these individuals. That's how it's worked in every church that I've been in anyway. Could be some differences between churches. And so I was at my first church, and I was sitting down with this nominating committee, and I had been there, I guess I had been there a year then, and I had just kind of watched how things worked and operated, and this lady was nominated to teach a Sunday school class, and she had been teaching that class. And so I said, no, we're not going to do that. And, well, these people looked at me like, what do you mean we're not going to do that? She's been teaching this class, she'd probably been teaching the class 10, 15, maybe 20 years. She had been in there a long time. And I said, there's an issue. And they said, well, what is it, Pastor? And I said, well, she only comes to church on Sunday morning. Now, a couple of things I'd say about that. I'm a stickler for that. Now, I realize some people work shift work. I realize that, it's not possible in some situations for people to be at church every service. Now, so I believe anybody in leadership, and I believe this from the very beginning, I held myself to the same standard before I was a pastor. Some of you may consider it to be legalistic, and if you do, that's okay. But I think if you're a leader, a teacher, you lead a ministry, and when I say leadership, it's really servant leadership. We're called to be servants first and foremost. The greatest among you will be servant of all, Jesus says. So, but if you're gonna serve in that capacity, then you need to be a model of Christ likeness. You need to be somebody that supports the local church, and by that I mean that window being out of center, looking at that bar. Hey, y'all hush. I got 5 rescue dogs in my house, but little ones. But I believe that you're to be an example. And so that means that you need to be at church, right? And so I just told this committee, I said, listen, I said, I'm not going to have one of my children, because she taught a children's class. I said, I'm not going to have one of my children or another one of these children show up on Sunday night or Wednesday nights and ask their parent, where's my Sunday school teacher at? Right? I said, it's just not going to happen. And so that was a hill that I was willing to die on. And so the committee said, let me beat these dogs real quick. Y'all hush. All right, maybe they'll be quiet for 2 minutes. So I said, yeah, this is a hill that I'm willing to die on, basically. And so they said, well, okay, Pastor. And they were, the committee was very supportive, but, they were also concerned. They said, if you do this, that entire family will leave this church. Now, we're talking about a small rural church, 30 people, 40, maybe 45, 50 on a good Sunday. But, your average in Sunday school was probably normally 20-something, maybe up close to 30. And, so they had other family in the church. She had a daughter. She had some grandchildren there. And I said, okay, well, I mean, they can all leave, Now, let me say something about that, and let me say something about this whole situation. First of all, as a pastor, I had allowed that to happen for a year, And again, I'm new. I don't want to go in and make any radical changes. They already had that stuff in motion when I got to the church to be their pastor, and so I didn't upset the apple cart. That's one thing. Two is, though, I should have went, 6 months in, as I see this pattern, I really should have gone to this lady and talked to her myself, right, instead of going through the committee. But now this was the committee's responsibility, and so in my mind, I said, well, I'm just going to let this thing run, and when it comes back around, we're just going to tell her that she can't serve. And so now the reason I call this a crazy story is because you just sometimes you have all the answers, but you don't know what the questions are. Now, I firmly believe in people who serve. They need to be faithful, and they need to come to church as much as possible. So one of the people on the committee went to tell her that she would no longer be able to serve as a Sunday school teacher for that children's class. And so, she was, well, it just wasn't something she was expecting. And I don't know that she necessarily got mad about it, but probably upset. And she asked why. And they told her that, well, I don't know exactly what they said. I'm sure they probably said, well, the pastor said, And so here's the crazy thing about it. She said, well, I don't come because I don't drive at night. And not all the time. Now that's not all the time would it be dark, like the time change and all, when we would leave church, but because for half the year she was unable to drive at night, she just elected on those other nights, on Wednesday nights and Sunday nights, just not to come. And she said, and so she told them, she said, if somebody would pick me up, I would come. And so this individual on the committee came back to me and they said, well, Brother Gerald, we talked to her, here's the situation. And I just told them, I said, hey, if she'll come, I don't have any issue with it. She can stay in that class. I mean, my whole issue is the example and the witness. If you're going to teach children that coming to church is important, you got to come to church, right? And, so I said, hey, if she'll come, it's no problem. And so they worked it out where a family or two in the church took turns, I guess, probably going to get her or whatever. And that settled the situation. There were no hard feelings, and everything just worked out. And so I was very, very thankful for that, because I didn't want a family to leave the church. But one of the things, as kind of a side note to this, in ministry, you're going to get put in that situation. You're going to get put in a situation where people say, hey, if we don't do this, this, and this, whatever it is, then we're going to leave the church. It's happened at every church I've served at. I've been put in that situation, except for where I'm at now, but I haven't been there that long, and I am not, I'm a pastor, not the pastor, if you will. And so Pastor Gabe probably makes, more of those kind of decisions maybe than I would have to. But it just happens in churches. I know that over the course of time, the church I'm at now, people have not gotten their way and they have left, right? That's unfortunately, that's just a part of ministry. There are some things that you probably should leave a church over, bad doctrine, bad practice, but too often people just pull up and run over the smallest thing. So, but you're going to be faced with that, and as a pastor, you're going to have to make that decision. Am I here to do what I believe is pleasing to God, or am I here to please man, right? And so you don't want to be a hireling. And now, I'm not saying that you should respond in this exact situation the same way I did. Whatever your conviction about it is, I have a strong conviction. Everywhere I've served, my deacons have been active. They come to church. They're there. Because quite frankly, if I'm the pastor of the church and they don't come, they're not going to be a deacon, because again, serving in that capacity, and a deacon's not like a pastor. They are a servant by nature and by name, but they need to set the example, and I think we need to set the bar high. If it's not important to us, it's not going to be important to our children. It's not going to be important to our grandchildren. It's not going to be important to, just other people that God entrusts to us within our local congregation. And so, and I guess I tell this as a crazy story, not because of me not letting somebody teach. And if I didn't, a family would potentially get mad and leave. It's kind of a crazy story because it was really my first point of contention, and because of the way it worked out, everything just worked out. It was really in some sense, it was a misunderstanding, and that's why I say I should have went to the person myself earlier, because had I done that, I probably would have figured that out months before, and then we could have talked to some people, and we could have made sure that she had a ride to get to and from church, and it would have never came down to that. So I guess I would add one more thing as a piece of advice. Most of the time, problems don't get better if you ignore them. Most of the time it grows and it festers and it gets infected and it becomes a much larger problem. And case in point would be this scenario. Had I went, since I told her she couldn't teach, that really could have hurt her, and she could have got mad, and they could have left instead of resolving this just because they felt betrayed. Whereas had I went earlier, because in her mind she could easily say, well, this is what I've been doing, nobody said anything about it, Brother Gerald hasn't said anything to me about it, right? And thankfully it didn't go that way, but it certainly could have. So anyway, I hope y'all enjoyed this. I hope it's helpful to somebody, and I look forward to seeing y'all in the next video. And my prayer for you is always the same, that the Lord might richly bless you and that you might see all of your blessings as from Him.